I'm quite sure a lot of you will understand the significance of Tony Blair in British politics, not to mention the rest of the world, especially Europe. Tony Blair has been one of the most effectual people we've ever had, and I'm not saying that in a good way. As we all know, his track record stinks. And the thing that Tony did when he was in power that makes him stand out from the rest is he didn't just run the country, he changed the civil service. So most of the Sir Humphrey types in the civil service that we never see, we never know the names of, are Blairites. Professor Ferguson, for instance, who provided us with excessive modelling during the pandemic, is a Blairite. Ollie Robbins, who Theresa May chose in a Brexit voting country to do backdoor deals with Michel Barnier in the European Union, was a Blairite. And he was doing that simultaneously to our Brexit minister, Dominic Raab, having face-to-face meetings that were televised and dished out to the public, but through the back door. That's what was organised. And then he got a 20 grand bung for doing it. So where Tony's been clever, Tony's been able to leave number 10, walk away from the power seat, and still have a huge degree of control. I'll show you how that extends. During the pandemic, Tony Blair announced on his Tony Blair Institute page that the Tony Blair Institute, this is verbatim, were proud to announce that they were embedded in governments across the world to advise on restrictions. Now, embedded is a really important word in this because embedded means they're already in the government. That means the civil service across the world. So there he is again, this man who went into Iraq, this man who went looking for weapons of mass destruction and came back with 2 catapults and a slingshot, him, still being influential, the man that got the Charmian Prize for working towards the federalisation of Europe. I think there's only him and Ted Heath ever got it in Britain. Angela Merkel got it. The Charmian Prize is for someone who works towards the federalisation. Federalisation means you can't step away from it. You're in. That's it. Now, this country voted not to be in. This country voted to leave. And we've had nothing but betrayal since. So this video is, in essence, about infiltration, because Tony Blair has managed to infiltrate political influence for as long as it takes, because he's within the civil service internationally. And many members of the civil service are also members of the Tony Blair Institute. Now, we've been had over, the public, because we just did it honestly. We went, we voted, we came out in huge numbers. We thought we'd get Brexit. And the Tory party have tried to stop that at every interval. I myself campaigned with Vote Leave. And as you know, I've got pictures with all of them. Jacob Rees-Mogg, Boris, before he was PM, when he was leader of Vote Leave, Gove. Because I believed in what I was doing. I did it sincerely. I did it with passion. I don't know what they did it with. It's been a total letdown. How many ditches did Boris want to die in before he dragged Brexit to the wire? And Theresa May before him. And what we're looking at here is this, what's going on TV now is just theatre. Labour are going to win this election. And the only difference is how much majority they're going to get. Now, we can affect that majority by getting some new faces on those back benches. It doesn't necessarily have to be reform. I'm not a big supporter of any particular party, but I do think reform gives us our best chance. Not because they're the best party. They're like all political parties. If you look inside, you want to put the lid back on. But they will get the lion's share of publicity now. Now, what I would have done if I was a small party leader, just hear me out. Please tell me what you think on the thread. You don't have to agree with me. I'm just sounding this out. You know, YouTube seems to be a better platform for me, and I'm enjoying coming on it because I can be a bit more detailed. Imagine I'm a small party leader, the June Slater party, and I decide I want to be an MP, but I've no money. And I can't influence anything. I've no following. Pretend I've only got 2,000 followers. No one's listening to me. I'm not known locally. How do I do that? But I've started a party. Well, I know what I'd do. I'd look at the horse that's getting the publicity, and I'd wear their colours. And I'd think, right, sod it, I am a small party, I'm not getting any notice taken of me, I'm not getting on the telly, but they are, they're getting on the telly. So stand under their banner, that's what I'd do. I'd stand under their banner because a small party is not so important in this first election as to manifestos or policy, because they're not going to be the government. So the policies are almost irrelevant. As long as you've got a basic outline of what they want, bring immigration down, improve the national health, more education, blah, blah, blah. It's all irrelevant because they're not going to be making any policy, are they? They're not going to become the government. And that's what the electorate need to understand. It's been my forte since I started this to explain politics to people who don't understand it. I don't care about the political bubble, the journalists and your Kusenbergs and your other politicians. They understand what's going on. Lots of people in our country and abroad do not understand politics. It's a dirty game. So with that in mind, if I'd have been running a small party, rather than trying to push my small party as a leader of a small party, I'd have approached reform, because they won't come to you. They won't come to you because they see themselves as the main one now. And rightly so, because a key character, a very key character, like him or not, he's a key character in British politics, Nigel Farage, has come back into the arena to lead the charge. It's a second Brexit, really, but the Brexit is for leaving things like the WHO pandemic treaty, for not being told what to do outside of our own country, for getting our sovereignty back. And Nigel will stimulate the voting electorate. He will get people out to vote. Loads of people don't want to vote, but that's what I would have done. If I was a small party and Reclaim won't work with me, then I'd go and work with Reclaim. You think about it. A lot of regimes, successful regimes, did it by infiltrating the one already in control or the one that was more seen. And you do it from the inside. Companies do it. Companies do inverted takeovers. Carpetland bought Allied Carpets out, but still traded as Allied, I think it was, that way around. But the one that was buying them out had the bigger name. The one had a smaller name. So they do an inverted takeover. They just use the name. It's done in business all the time. But unfortunately, with these small parties, their egos get in the way. I'll never understand that as long as I live, because I'm only doing this because I want to create change. I want to create information that you can use for your future to create change. Because this two-party system is corrupt and nobody's ever going to make any headway. It's like swimming with a log on your back and everybody else has just got the Speedos on. So that's what I would have done if I was a small party. I'd have put my party badge to one side, contacted Reform and said, I'll stand. That way you would eliminate the chances of anyone standing against you from a significant small party, and you'd have got their backing to help you, and you'd have made more of an impact. That's what I would have done. There's some really good people out there like Tech Con from ADF Party and David Curtin from Heritage. They're good people trying to do the right thing, but you've not buried your ego. You've not turned it on its head. I turn every problem I'm ever faced with on its head. Right, it's A's on top and B's below. Turn it over. What happens then if we turn it round? I do that all the time and it works. So I would have, if I was a political party that was floundering because I never get any seats, because I've done it for year after year, I would have used Reform to get me out there, to get what I stand for out there. Because you've got to remember, once the candidates get into office in Parliament, currently Labour and Tory can bully their MPs to vote. It's called the whip. It's a bully, basically. They go around, and if you don't agree with what the government's doing or the party's doing, the whip can say, vote with us or we will, whatever they decide to do. Could be blackmail, could be bribery. You'll get a seat in the House of Lords. Don't stand against us. You're nearly retiring, you'll be in the House of Lords soon. It goes on all the time. But a small party like Reform haven't got any facilities to do that. They can't offer that. So, because they're not a government, they're not going to be a government in this election. Maybe in the next one, but not this one. So we have to work with what we've got, and that's what I would have done. Never, ever forget the influence that Tony Blair has had on this country and continues to have. Years ago, when I first started blogging, I came across the blog. He was better at it than me and he had more followers. He had 16,000 followers. I had about 6. And it was a bit of, my dad would have called him a beatnik. He had his hair tied back in a long ponytail and tattoos and smoked like crazy. But he put some good stuff out. He was quite good at visuals. And he said to me, well, you do know Tony Blair runs this country. And I thought he were bonkers. I remember thinking, eh? Because I was that naive. Oh, he said, Tony Blair runs this country. He said, it's not run from number 10. That's just a stage. That's just for us to look at on the telly, to think it's being run from number 10. He says, it's not being run from there. It's being run by people like Tony Blair and non-government organisations. I'd never heard that phrase before. Non-government organisations, NGOs. Look at what's behind everything. NGO boats picking up migrants in the Channel. NGO boats picking up migrants in the Mediterranean. NGOs issuing instructions on how we should behave in a pandemic. NGO. The WHO. It's an NGO. The World Health Organization. It sounds like some formidable body of integrity. It's not. You could be forgiven for thinking it's a racket. When China fund it and Bill Gates funds it, and China and Bill Gates did all right out of this pandemic, as all billionaires did. So we cannot trust what we are delivered by the media. So it's never been more important than to source good bloggers and things via the internet. I'm new to YouTube. I've had an account for a few years, but someone's been ripping it off since January and sharing my other social media posts to their account, pretending to be me. And I didn't realise how much damage they'd done. Not damage, but, you know, nicking my stuff. It's not on, is it? I don't charge for watching me anywhere, and he's got a monetised account. So I've decided that I'm going to give YouTube a go. The response I've had yesterday has been fantastic. I've had personal messages on Facebook, the response on the thread, and you can always tell a fake channel because they never respond to you about you on your thread. I'm one of the few bloggers that does. Most bloggers are interested in putting content out. They ignore the thread, and all they want you to do is buy the bloody t-shirt, get a mug, sign up, pay here. I'm not doing this for money. I'm retired. I made my money when I was working, and I thought, instead of concentrating on myself, this is the era in my life where I can think, God, I can do this. I can explain that better. I had a driving school when I was younger, and I had a really good pass rate. I was the only female in Lancashire at the time, and I had a really good pass rate, like 98%. People couldn't understand why my students passed. And I'll tell you why they passed. Because I took the trouble to explain what the driving test was like. I used to have little seminars in my house. We didn't have social media then. We were watching VHS on videos. So I'd hire a video about the driving test and invite people to my house. £5, wine and cheese, explain the test standard. So they were comfortable when they went for the driving test. They weren't nervous. They weren't thinking that the examiner is austere and unfriendly. The examiner's not talking to you because he doesn't want you to be nervous because you're a new driver and you've enough to take on board under those circumstances, being tested for something you're new at. It's an unusual thing as a driving test, actually, because normally a student would study things until they become more expert, like a degree, years and years of day after day after day studying a topic, but not your driving test. Your driving test, it's what, 15, 20 lessons? Get in there. So I explained that he's not being silent and only giving instruction because he's horrible. He's doing it so he doesn't distract you, because the first thing a student would do is, oh, I'm glad you're talking to me. And then the concentration's gone. Explaining that small fact made such a difference to every single person I taught to drive. And I love that job. So that's how I've approached my blogging. It's not about putting content out for money and having to feed the beast, which is what my copycat's doing on YouTube. I've reported it a zillion times. It's about being able to talk to people like this. Actually, I feel more comfortable on YouTube than anywhere else because I generally have to get my point across so fast because people haven't got time. I think YouTubers seem to be a bit more pragmatic and they've got their earpods in when they're walking or they're doing something else in the house, which suits me fine. So what we've got to look at, infiltration, could have been what we used coming up to this election. We could have infiltrated reform with the smaller parties and benefited from the immense publicity that reform will now get through the mainstream media. Farage was on again this morning. I don't know how he does it. I don't know how he keeps up day after day, travelling around. And the other thing you've got to notice about Nigel Farage, no matter what you think about him, he's out there meeting people. What do the others do? I know this with Vote Leave. The staged interactions, they're not natural. Nigel Farage goes to a place, takes a team with him, and turns up in a pub in Clacton. You're not going to be there this particular time. It's an open audience. Now, when I worked with Vote Leave as a volunteer, I just went out with leaflets on a Saturday and did what I could, and I started blogging. When I was invited to meet Boris, it was all staged in a Wetherspoons pub. Wetherspoons, he must be sick in. After the way the Tories have betrayed small businesses, Wetherspoons gave up their pubs for Vote Leave to have venues. And the red bus came and the audience was invited. It was all people who were supportive. It was a closed shop. There was never going to be any eggs thrown at you, milkshakes, because everybody there supported what you were doing. That's the difference with MPs fighting for the seats from the big parties and Nigel Farage. The small parties could have benefited from that. So I would say if you're living locally and you've got an independent candidate that you favour, that's as good as voting for reform if you think they'll get in. Because as long as you don't vote for the Tories, I'm not talking to people here who would vote Labour because they've had it. Labour have had it. But the Tories and the Labour have never challenged each other for years. So you wouldn't think we had a Tory government. You'd think it was Labour that was in. And that isn't going to change no matter who gets in number 10. It's going to be Keir. So we can either have Keir Starmer in number 10 with a credible opposition, with more people infiltrating it, so it's not just the Tories again, that there's 15, it would be marvellous to have 15 or 20 small party candidates in those seats. Doesn't have to be reform, as long as they're not Tory and as long as we challenge Labour. We need to get a credible opposition before we can do anything about becoming a government. I hope that's explained quite a bit. I'm going to read your comments on the thread because I do this for feedback. I don't do this because I'm telling you what to do. I do it because I want to see what you think, because that's how we work how the nation's going. And I feel a bit of a buzz about it at the moment. I feel a bit of life has come back into the nation, and I'm usually pretty good at reading the terrain